For Stephen Ridgway. Okay, Cisco phones, yet more vulnerabilities. CV2023-20078, rated at 9.8 out of 10 on the CVSS scoring system. So, yeah, pretty vulnerable. Fairly serious. There are patches available, so recommend if you are using Cisco phones, you should look to patch ASAP. So the phones affected are 6800, 7800, 7900, and 8800 series products. So if you're using any of those, recommend having a look at the available patches. End of last year, GitHub released a secret scanning service, not a secret scanning service, but a scanning service for secrets, to alert admins if there are any API keys, passwords, authentication tokens, and so on that have inadvertently been stored in GitHub repositories. This has now been rolled out to the public. So as of today, possibly yesterday, GitHub has made this function available to all users. So it is worth scanning through your code repositories. It's surprising, around 8% of repositories apparently have been found to contain some form of secrets. So in the testing, at least, that's been done this far, so would recommend making use of that. So if you're in the dev world, or you've got your dev team working for you, then ask them to have a look at that and just make sure that nothing has slipped in that shouldn't be there. Okay. Next, a couple of articles talking about, well, specifically around Google Cloud Platform, but the issue is a generic one and will undoubtedly crop up elsewhere. It is very difficult to identify from the available logs what actions have been taken on data that are held in GCP buckets. Now, firstly, logging isn't switched on by default. So if you are concerned, which I think we all should be concerned about data which is held in storage buckets, by default, you've got no visibility at all over this. You have to go and turn the visibility on. However, if you do that, there isn't a straightforward way to identify the difference between data being read or data being copied. So the description and event for different types of access, reading a file, downloading a file, copying a file to an external bucket or servers, or even just reading the metadata, all comes under the same event description. So this makes it really difficult to identify whether the data has just been used as in accessed legitimately by legitimate business processes, or whether something nefarious has been going on with it. Google's thoughts on this is that it's not a security issue, although I think I would disagree with respect to that. So, security issues are not solely those technical issues, vulnerabilities and so on. If you think back to the incident response life cycle, one of the key activities is detection. If you haven't got visibility of what's happening, it's very difficult to move forward through the incident response lifecycle until something particularly nasty has happened, and you do actually get to notice it, but normally at that point it's something fairly critical. So early detection of potential security issues is very important indeed. I think very much part of the secure approach to hosting data. So I disagree with Google that this isn't a security issue. I think it's at very least a failing. It's not a vulnerability. I would agree with that. It's something that apparently customers of Google have not asked for, which I think is firstly a little surprising if it's true. Secondly, a little disappointing, seeing as there's a lot of data out there now, and securing it is it is on the radar for most organizations. So what are the takeaways from this? Well, you are partly at the mercy of your cloud provider if you're going to put data in the cloud. You don't necessarily understand clearly what's been happening to things that they look after for you. And if they won't provide you the logs, then you really don't have any simple ways of knowing actually what is going on. Secondly, it is worth making sure that if there are visibility features that will help you to understand what's going on in your organization, then you have to go and turn those on. We can all remember the days many years ago when operating systems, Windows in particular, had a vast amount of, vast number of features that could help you secure it, all of which were turned off by default, so that the focus was on functionality, and security came, in a distant second place compared to the usability and functionality of the system. I think cloud services are possibly somewhere in that space as well. They are improving from a security perspective, but they are most certainly not, as some people say, by default more secure than running things in-house. I would say the opposite is probably true. And then also think about, if you're going to be moving data to the cloud, think about which cloud. Make sure that the cloud provider you've got does provide you the information that you need. It's not difficult to migrate cloud. Well, it is difficult to migrate cloud providers under some circumstances, but it may well be that if your cloud provider can't provide you the information that you need, you may well need to consider either leaning on them to do improve, add enhancements, or alternatively vote with your feet and go to somewhere which is giving you the security information that you need. And then finally from today, come across an article from Malwarebytes Labs, that shows that AI can crack voice recognition in at least some banking applications. So you may have noticed that there is now a trend towards some form of biometric identification for banking apps. Voice ID is slowly working its way across various banks worldwide as a way to perform user authentication over the phone. Well, I think up until relatively recently, that may well have been quite a successful approach. People's voices, although they are, you can mimic a voice, it's difficult for a human to fool the systems put in place in banking authentication to spoof of user. However, with about 5 minutes worth of recorded voice and little patience with tweaking, it is quite possible and demonstrated on a demonstrated on Lloyds Bank app, that it is possible for AI to successfully spoof somebody's voice. Biometrics as authentication are interesting. They're not binary. Passwords right or wrong. A authenticator key is you've either got it right or you haven't. Biometrics work on a level of probability. So your fingerprints, your iris scans, your voice prints, all of these things have a certain amount of entropy. So they're not absolutely identical every time. Imagine if you cut your finger, your fingerprint looks slightly different. So there's a level of subjectivity involved in whether these factors actually do identify you or not. And the other side of it is they're very difficult to change. And this is something that I have some concerns about, that once this stuff is out there, it is very difficult for you to change it. If somebody's got a digital copy of your fingerprints and can inject that into a fingerprint reader, side channel or whatever is needed in order to do that, but once they've got it, and you can't change that. Whereas with a password or with one-time use, 2FA codes, those sorts of things, at least they're not static. So yeah, interesting. We'll have to see where that goes. As with many things, but yeah, you can tell because getting 5 minutes worth of my voice clearly wouldn't be difficult. I'm not about to enable voice recognition on any of my apps. So that's all from me today, and I will speak to you all again tomorrow.